Well, I want to thank B&H and Westcott for giving me this opportunity. I've been doing a lot of speaking lately, actually the last couple of years, and I love it. I love sharing what I have a passion for. And I'm assuming you're here because you have a passion to create, passion for photography. I started back when I was a freshman in high school, and that was a long time ago. In fact, I processed my first black and white roll of film in 1972. And I've seen a lot of changes, and I'm sure you guys have too, over the years, and we're in some good times. Now, it's been an interesting transition from, I guess, the last, say, 10 years for most of us. But usually when I speak, a lot of people that I talk to haven't been taking pictures more than, say, 4 years. So there's a lot of new people in this industry creating images, and some of us older people don't like that. It's like, it's overcrowded now, right? There was a lot of competition back when, 10, 15 years ago. Now there's even more competition. Sometimes that's tough to handle that. But my goal today is to really talk about sort of lighting. And I have a lot of presentations, and one of the things that I do is I like people to think differently about photography, and the way they look and approach the whole process. There's a lot of, I guess photographers are kind of a strange group of people, but we have a lot of cliques, and we have a lot of definitions that define us and they put us sort of in a little box, so to speak. And what I want is, I want to take and as I share about what I have a passion for in photography, is to get you to think a little differently about photography. Okay? So when I was starting out, there were the photojournalists, okay, and they had a photojournalism department at the University of Arizona, and then they had the fine art department, okay? And if you were a photojournalist, okay, and you wanted to document the world around you, what kind of camera did you use?
Probably Nikon.
Okay, now, a 35 millimeter, right?
Right.
But if you were really serious about it, being a photojournalist, and you wanted to take it to the next level, what kind of 35 millimeter did you have? A rangefinder Leica, okay? And so if you were a landscape, black and white landscape photographer like Ansel Adams, what kind of camera did you use?
I used a Kodak 4x5.
A view camera, okay? So I kind of grew up rubbing elbows with a lot of people that defined a lot of what they did by the camera and by the process, right? So if you were a serious landscape photographer, you might take it to a level that you would say, you might not put your negative in a larger, you might just contact print it. Because the ultimate process or presentation for a negative was a contact print. 1-to-1. No, you didn't put in a in a larger glass, and the dust and the air would cause a degradation of the image, whatever. And so, if you were really, really serious, you'd take it to the next level, which would be 8x10. And so, if you were, like, say, a landscape photographer, and you showed up and you were used a 4x5, and then someone showed up with an 8x10, they kind of trumped you. Okay? They were more serious than you because they had an 8x10. And then someone would show up with 11x14 camera, And so there was all these tiers of sort of, where you stood in the photographic community. And if you printed in the standard darkroom silver print, that was cool. But if you did platinum palladium printing, you were even cooler. You were even more of a purist. And so this is how I grew up, okay? And so I think it was really the changing of the guard, so to speak, from film to digital, that all this sort of came out. All these debates about, what's digital now truly photography, okay? and all these things started, coming out, and the definition of photography. And so I started defending the platform that I was standing on, because you defend your slot in the, okay? And when I defended, okay, no matter where you put your slot, okay, if you take a line in the sand and you say, this is where I stand, there's always going to be someone to the left of you, and there's always going to be someone to the right of you, okay? And so, I spent a lot of time debating issues about photography, which is good because it kind of gives you an idea of where people stand, and it helps you maybe define where you stand, and that could be good. But here's what happened. I started doing composites. I would take and shoot someone in a studio, and then I would shoot the background and put the two together. And I got all sorts of hate mail. I got people calling me up. A lot of them were my friends that I rubbed elbows with all these years, and they said, Joel, you're no longer a photographer, you're now an illustrator. And so I'd start to debate that, well, Ansel Adams, he manipulated, and if he was alive today, he would be doing digital, and he'd be doing all this stuff, right? And so what happened was, one day, I'm not the brightest guy on the planet, but one day I went, I'm sick and tired of debating, and I said, if I really define myself, I am truly, first and foremost, an artist. Doesn't matter what tools I use. The tools are secondary. Yes, I love cameras. I love lenses. And I shot for almost 10 years. I did a series of portraits with a 4x5 and Type 55 Polaroid. I shot over 7,000 sheets of that film. Processed it all myself. Love shooting the large format portrait. But I had to make a decision. What's the most important thing for me? And that is to be an artist, and I have a passion to create. And once you say that's the most important thing, all the tools don't matter. They all fall by the wayside. And so when people come to me and say, oh yeah, film, film's true photography, digital, sucks and whatever, and I just smile. Because you know what? Again, I guess at one point I was there a little bit, but really in the end, it's the passion to create. I would say this, 15 years ago, this picture would not have been really truly accepted in the photo community. It's overexposed. Where's the deep blacks? I studied the zone system. Remember the zone system? Black and white photography? I studied it for, more than 10 years. I got to the point where I was calibrating all my lenses. I was calibrating my enlarger lenses, the whole process to where you literally, everything you did was taking notes and calculations, taking a densitometer, taking your negatives. You start out with a spot meter, the 1 degree spot meter, and all that. Okay, so I went through all that zone system, training, and which I think is good to have that kind of training. But in the end, I threw it all out the window, and now I create. My goal is not to achieve the perfect exposure, but to create an image that fulfills me as an artist, my vision as an artist, and hopefully there's an audience that responds to it. But before we get on, I'm going to share this with you. Not every artist is loved by everyone, okay? We know that in music, right? We all have different styles of music, okay? I have this whole thing called country western versus rap, okay? If you happen to represent, let's say in the photo vision of things, country western, and you go to present your work to someone who happens to love rap, and you go, here it is, why are you surprised when they don't like it? We get hurt though, right? Because we're human beings, we're creative and artists, and when someone doesn't like our work, So what happens is we try to always adjust our work to please other people. In the end, we don't really represent who we are. So if that was the case, then most of the artists that we, love in the music industry, if they went from country western to rap to jazz to pop to rock to, they moved around all the time, we wouldn't even probably like them anymore, right? We want who they are, what they represent as their vision, and that's why we fall in love with them. They're one of a kind. I have a whole thing on that. So you are an artist. You are unique. one of a kind on this planet. There's no one just like you. The greatest single thing you possess as an artist is your uniqueness. Stick with that, and you will rock the world. If you go and try to copy other people, you're going to blend with the masses. So now that I've sort of gotten that out of the way, we're going to talk about lighting. But it's impossible to please everyone. And so when I teach, I want people to say, look, this is what I love, okay? And I say, okay, as we go down a path, stick with that vision, and then the audience will come to you. If you, again, are always trying to please someone else, you're never going to find the right audience. And so the images that you see that I'm showing you now are pretty much a result of the last 4 years, 4-ish years. I had to reinvent myself, and I go down a path that I love, a path that I can't wait to do. I can't wait to get up in the morning and create images of people, artists, athletes. I like to make people larger than life. If you're a good-looking person, I like to make you look better. If you're an athlete and you're, pretty buff, I like to make you look even more buff. I'm always out to make someone go, that's really me? Wow, that looks great. And they love that image. And so anyways, so let's talk about lighting, okay? I would say this, that for the most part, lighting is a mystery, right? Okay? That is me, by the way. And I put somebody's head on there, Charles, a friend of mine. But actually, I do have a six-pack. It's just hidden. It's insulated right now. Here's Hope Solo. You might have seen her in the Olympics recently. But lighting is a mystery. So my question is, how do I take the mystery out of it? How do I get you to say, you know what? Wow, that makes sense. Okay? And so there's a lot of confusion in lighting, and there's a lot of options in lighting. And so what I want to do is I want to take the mystery out of it. But the first thing is you have to determine where you want to end up. Okay? Where do you want to end up? If you know where you want to end up, getting there is really easy. If you don't know where you want to end up, you're going to be like, a ship without a rudder. Okay? So you say, you know what? I don't really know where I want to end up. That's no problem. That's when you sit down and you go and you look at imagery. Maybe it's not even imagery. It could be paintings. It could be, I've been inspired by paintings. It may be just a movie. It may be a song. It may be just walking through a forest. Things that inspire you, and as you begin to develop your vision as an artist, then you say, hey, this is where I want to end up, okay? So don't be surprised, though, if you're a little confused about where you want to end up. But that just takes time. I've been doing this a long time, okay? And so, but you know what? Even if you're just new at photography, you've been looking at images your whole life, and you've been inspired your whole life, okay? So, and I guarantee you that as you look through images, you go, don't like, ooh, I like that. Don't like, ooh, I like that. So it doesn't take long. You can get an idea where you want to end up, okay? So let's talk about lighting. And what are the things that really determine the quality of light? So I don't like, and I do not work from, I'm going to just put this clear out front, okay? I don't use lighting ratios. I don't use a histogram. I don't use a flash meter. I don't use schematics. What else is left? Well, there's one thing left, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's talk about, how do I determine the quality of light? How do I determine that? And really, there's two things that determine the quality of light. And I would say quality of light can be the simplest, defined by this: harsh, soft. Okay, let's make it really simple. Harsh lighting or soft lighting, okay? And so I look at a photograph, or if I want to go in a direction, I say I want to get the light harsher, I want edgier, or I want to soften it. Okay, those are really the two simplest ways of saying This is how I can define it. And those two things are determined by the size of your source in relationship to the subject or the distance, and how much reflection or bounce light that's coming in the scene. Those are the two single most important things to determine the quality of light as it applies to harshness and softness. Okay? Well, I'm going to explain it to you in a minute, but let's move on from there. Okay? It's really this simple, folks. Okay? So I have this little statement. I've been saying this for a long time, about 5 years now. The larger the source of light, or the modifier, in relationship to the subject, the softer the light. Or the smaller the source in relationship to your subject, the harsher the light. Okay? So let's take a look at that. How's that work? To soften a light, so let's say I have a modifier. Here's a modifier. This is a Westcott small box. I think it's about 24 by 18, something like that. If I take this, and let's say you're my subject, okay? And I put a strobe in here and I go, pop, okay? And I look at the light and I say, too harsh. I have a choice. I can either move you in or move the light toward you, and as I move it towards you, it gets softer, 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 softer. Now I got to adjust for the fact that now I put more power, or it's closer, so I have more power. I have to adjust the f-stop. Or actually, I don't adjust the f-stop, I adjust the power in the back. I always set my f-stop on my camera, especially in the studio environment, say at between 7.1 and f9. That's because that's the sweet spot of the lens. And I always adjust my power output on my strobe to fine-tune my lights. That way, I don't have that f-stop variable to deal with anymore. Now, obviously in the studio, I'm going to have my sync speed at around 200th a second. 1/80th, 200, somewhere around there. Okay? But basically, I'm going to adjust my power output. And how do I know if I'm overexposed or underexposed? You look at the monitor. In the old days, actually, in fact, when I first started out, I had a friend who went to art center. I was a fine artist at the University of Arizona. I didn't know what a strobe was. I mean, I knew what a strobe was. I've never used a strobe, really, other than an on-camera flash. And so when he brought me in, we had a studio. We had one softbox this size right here. Okay? That's the first softbox I ever had. And he said, you know, there's the light, and here's a light meter. Okay? And I'm like, okay, well, how do I use this thing? And so he showed me, you know, he said, okay, you know, you take the reading and then set your camera f-stop accordingly. Well, I did that, and my pictures didn't look very good. I was doing Polaroid at the time, but in fact, I know that there are some people in here that probably live and die by their light meter or flash meter. But I have a question for you. And I ask this question all the time. I've been asking it for 30 years. Do you point your flash meter toward the light source or toward the subject? 50% of the people say toward the subject, 50% of the people say toward the light source. Well, there's two completely different readings, okay? And so that just adds more confusion to the whole thing for me, right? Here's the problem with a flash meter. It determines how much light is coming from a light source to that little dome. It doesn't tell you what you're supposed to set your f-stop on your camera. Because who determines that?
You do.
The artist. It's a creative process. Okay? But we want a technical instrument to assist us in the creative process. Guess what? I think I'm jumping ahead here, but a technical instrument can never make a creative decision. That's reserved for the human mind or an artist. Okay? So there's a place for a flash meter. However, I haven't used one in probably 25 years. Okay? It has no place for me because I don't want to know the exact light that's coming from the light source to the subject, edge light, whatever. I want to know what the monitor's telling me, what's happening on the monitor, and I say, I like it or I don't like it. So we'll get into that. I'm jumping ahead. The bigger the source, in relationship to your subject, the softer the light, okay? The smaller the source, the edger light. I'm going to explain that here in a minute. To achieve a harder or harsher light, move your modifier further away from your subject or get a smaller modifier. Okay, so if I have an athlete, okay, and I want to create a pretty edgy look on that athlete, okay, so let's say I start out with this. And, you know, I got a studio environment, or maybe I'm outdoors or whatever, but I put this, say, 4 or 5 feet from my subject, okay? Gives them plenty of room to, you know, flex and whatever. And I create an edgy light, okay? And I go, you know what? I want that athlete to jump through the air, right? And, you know, if it's a little too tight in there, I got to back these up. So I back them up, all of a sudden, ooh, my edge light gets really edgy. And I'm going, oh, what is my option here, right? Okay, well, I take a medium box. I say, well, it's actually a large. You know, Westcott has one in between this.
28.
And then they have a bigger one, okay? So I kind of call this a medium, but it's actually a large, okay? They have one larger, but we're going to talk about that in a minute. This is 36 by 48, okay? Which is a really good size. I use this all the time. But if I put this about, say, 7 to 8 feet from my subject, I get a very similar look as this at about 3 or 4 feet from my subject. Okay, I'm going to explain it more in a minute. So that's what happens. I can now back this light up, this bigger source, I have to put a little more power through it, but now I have an option for my ballerina to go and jump and do all sorts of things, right? But it creates the same quality of light. Now, I'm going to show you that in a minute here, and it'll help illustrate. Now, don't criticize my little drawing here. I had to do this in Keynote, whatever it's called, and I'm limited to what I can do. But at any rate, you get the point. There's a guy, right? He's got no hair, poor guy, so here we have a small modifier, okay? And that is, let's just call it, it's just for simplicity, 3 feet from my subject, right? And let's say I like that light, which I do, actually. I use a beauty dish a lot, a 22-inch beauty dish, at about 2-ish feet away, 2.5 feet away. Or this. This is a little bit probably smaller than a beauty dish in terms of actual inches of surface. But this about 2 feet from a subject, beautiful light, okay? As an overhead light, okay? This is a 24 by 18, I believe. Somewhere around there. 1622, okay? Now, this is beautiful. You're going to watch this, okay? If I take a medium modifier, or we can call this large one, close to medium, and I put that 6 feet away, it will give me the exact same quality of light on the subject as a small modifier at, say, 2 or 3 feet away. Okay, now watch this. If I take a large modifier, really large, and put that, say, 12 feet away, it creates the exact same light on the face, if you had the angle the same, as the 3 foot or the 6 foot. Okay? Now, watch how this works. The way I determine that is very, very simple. Okay? And I don't have a lot of room here, but I'm gonna toss this right here. Okay? And if I take my subject, okay, so I don't know, let's say it's the wall or whatever, and I take this and walk this, if I have an assistant or someone, or I have it on a light stand, and I push this until, let's say I'm at the wall distance, it covers the exact same dimension as my large modifier. That's the exact distance that I need to have for those two modifiers to look exactly the same. Does that make sense? So when I cover this one up and fill this space, like right here, I see white around the large box. As I back it toward me, now again, I can't get to the wall unless someone held it for me, but there's a point in which this modifier will fill the frame or fill the surface area of the modifier behind it. When I get to that point, let's say that's, you know, about what, a 2-3 feet difference, something like that. That tells me that if I take both these modifiers and set them up, I can create the same quality of light, but this one's further back. Okay, this one's closer. Same quality light in the face. The difference is this. As this is closer, it lights the face but doesn't light the feet. Okay, it tapers the light down, good or bad. And a lot of athletes that I do, I love that tapering down so that the light kind of goes and just comes right up to the face. Okay, so I will put on a smaller modifier, right, and create a very dramatic portrait, but it's really close. It's like right in here. And I'm shooting right underneath it. Okay, I'll show you some behind the scenes in a minute. So, but I can't always shoot like that. And if I'm shooting for a client that has to have the clothing or shoes or whatever, I got to make a choice of either taking another light and lighting the feet or just getting a bigger modifier and back it up. And so I just shot a job last week or a week and a half ago, and the client wanted the legs lit. Okay, they wanted light on the legs. So I don't go with a small modifier. I go with a bigger modifier. Actually, you know, I was a 5-footer, 5-foot octo. Okay, so that the angle of light spreads more with the bigger modifier backed up. Okay, and so that I know. So here's another thing I do all the time. If I have a white sweep, paper sweep, I have my subject about 5 or 6 feet from the back of that paper. If I use a modifier like this on my subject, the background generally be a light gray. I put one of these on, pretty much takes it and almost makes it pure white. Maybe it's just a real light gray. Okay? So I can bring my subject and my modifiers away from the background, but eventually that background, which is a 9-footer, gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and pretty soon you can barely cover the subject in there. Okay? But I will go automatically, I'll say, in the back of my head, I want my background really white. So I'll go, you know what? I don't want to throw a light on it. I'll just get a big modifier, back it up a little bit, boom, it covers the whole paper. So I make decisions like that. But really, I change this out based on how edgy I want or how much room I need on the set. And I do that by not a flash meter, by guessing. And then I look at the back of the monitor and go, oh, it's too edgy or too hot. I call hot. Too bright. Power it down. Okay? So we'll talk some more about it. But does this make sense right here? Mm-hmm. Okay, it's really, you can do this with a octabox setup, umbrella setup, doesn't matter. Okay? So let me see if I can get to the next section here. What shape your modifier is has really little to do with the quality of light. Okay, so let's get this out of our heads. I can tell you right now, there's more confusion, and I have been confused. I was commercially shooting national ad campaigns, and I really didn't understand this until about 5 years ago. And part of it is about 5 years ago I started teaching workshops. And people ask me all these questions. I'm like, I don't know. And I started thinking about it, okay? I started experimenting. I'd take an umbrella in, do a picture. Take a softbox, do a picture. What's the difference? Take an octabox, take this, take that. Change them up. It's hard to pack a beauty dish, isn't it? Right? So how do I get a beauty dish on the field somewhere when I'm on an airplane? Just get a modifier that's the same size as a beauty dish. Doesn't matter. Square, round, shaped like a starfish. It's how big the surface is in relationship to the subject. That's what determines the quality of light. So I can get a very similar look from an umbrella. But here's the problem that most people use. When they use an umbrella, they make a mistake. Okay? You take a light source, okay, speed light, or you know, a Pro Photo or a Elechrome or whatever it is you're using, and you put it on an umbrella. Okay, so you got this pole, a shaft, and most of the time, I did for many years, I took and just left the regular standard hood on, right? What is that, 50 degrees, you know, spreading on a hood? I don't know what it is. It's not super wide, generally. And so I put an umbrella on, and I go and do a portrait with it, and guess what? I have a 60-inch umbrella. My light's blowing right in the middle. So what am I getting? About a 30-inch, 20-inch modifier. I'm not even using the full modifier. I'm thinking I'm using the full modifier. I'm not. So most people make a mistake in that they're not allowing the umbrella to be lit enough to use the full square inches of surface. And so people say, you know, I use an umbrella and I use a softbox, but the umbrella was really harsh. But the softbox was softer, right? Soft box, right? We don't say soft umbrella. So we get confused. But mainly it's because the light is not striking the whole umbrella, okay? If you back it up as far as you can and get a wide angle, if they make it, or just take the hood off, use the bare bulb, boom. You get less power, but you spread that light on that umbrella. Now, umbrellas generally also throw light everywhere. You know, if you have a sweep and you want it gray and you put an umbrella up, it's throwing light and hitting everything and throwing, you know. And so a box can corral the light a little bit more. But in the end, it's the size or the amount of surface area that modifier is being illuminated in front of a subject. All right, so we talked about bounce light. Let's see if this is my next slide here. All right, so here's the other thing. When you have a light source, if you're in a studio, you got a white sweep, you've got a white reflector on the floor. You got a white wall, white ceilings. You know, most studios aren't pure black, right? So when you set up a light, generally you're going to get some kind of bounce influence back into the subject. The more bounce you get back into the subject, the overall softness, apparent softness, is going to affect your, the overall look. Okay, good or bad. I do a lot of bouncing underneath people because you don't want, heavy shadows under chins and stuff like that. So I put a beauty dish or a softbox overhead. I put a little bit of bounce underneath, boom, and I fill in some things. It softens it up. If I put a bounce on the left, on the right, it would soften it up. Okay, so here's what happens. When I go out in the field and I'm shooting outdoor strobing, and I got to overpower the sun, or even if it's early morning or late evening, generally you're having a lot of natural light influencing the scene, okay? Good or bad, okay? Now, the good thing is you can get away with a smaller modifier outdoors in the field because let's say I really like this box at, say, 6 feet away, okay? And if I'm outdoors, I take this box at 6 feet away and I got all this ambient light, it's really soft. It's a lot softer than I like. So generally, what I do is I go to the next smaller modifier on the field, and I put this 6 feet away. Outdoors, amazing light. Okay? Because I got all that influence of natural light bouncing into the scene. So the one thing that's good about having a smaller modifier outdoors is what? The wind. You don't need 5 assistants to hold it down, right? Or 10 sandbags. So if I have some on YouTube. I have some videos of me out in Salton Sea Lake, whatever, and I've got these small ones set up because I don't need big modifiers outdoors. Okay, so that's just a little side thing. So the amount of bounce into your, I'm going to show you samples in a minute, but the amount of bounce definitely influences your overall harshness or softness. So, again, let's go back to this. Only you as an artist can determine really what works for you, what's best. Unless you have a client standing over you, which I do. And I have clients, they tell you, oh, it's too soft. Okay, I like this. But you know what? You're working for a client, right? So you edge it up. And but I know how to edge it up. That's the key to it. Where years ago, I didn't know that. I was kind of like, hit and miss. Okay? So, but now that I understand this, in terms of the bigger the source in relationship to the subject, softer light, it all makes sense to me now. So, Westcott's got some 7-foot umbrellas and a 7-foot octo. Okay? I love them. Now, a 7-foot octo cost about $700 plus. You say, $700 for a modifier? Well, first of all, let me tell you the difference. You have a roughly 100-foot umbrella, 7 foot, with a 20, 30-foot diffusion, dollar diffusion. So about $130 for a 7-foot modifier. You put the octabox and the 7-foot umbrella with a diffusion side by side, blow light through them. You cannot tell the difference. Impossible. They're 7-foot modifiers, right? Now, why would someone buy a 7-foot octo at $700 versus a umbrella at, say, $130 investment? What's the difference? Well, the umbrella is not real good outdoors, okay? And the chances are it's going to blow over. And when a 7-foot umbrella blows over, the chances are it's not going to hold up as well as a 7-foot octo when it blows over. You'll have a 7-foot octo for life. I say life, 20 years. I don't know, if you treat it right, it could be for life. Umbrella, probably not going to last as long. But here's what I tell people. If you want to experiment with big sources, get the umbrella with the diffusion, and it's the best modifier on the planet for the money. And every time I do a workshop, I show it, people go nuts, and they order them all. They just order like right there on the spot. And again, if you love that light and you're going to be shooting it for clients and you're packing it up, tearing it down, packing it up, tearing it down, get the octaboxes because you'll have it for 20 plus years. It's a great modifier. It's a little more durable, okay? So that's how I coach people. The other thing I say is this. There's a lot of modifiers out there, right? You can go on eBay and you can get some knockoff that's made in who knows where country for $30. I don't know, $50. I don't know, right? People come to me all the time. Hey, I found this softbox, blah, blah, blah. I go, great, guess what? It'll probably do exactly what you need to do. Problem is, a year from now, it's going to be falling apart. So you get what you pay for. And Westcott makes very good boxes. They're really thick material. They have these diffusions that come off. They have inner baffles that you can change in and out. So why would you put an inner baffle in and not? Why would you want to change it out, right? Well, if you're going to put a continuous light source in here, especially the spider lights, you don't need an inner baffle because the lights are already big, soft lights, and you put an inner baffle, it's just cutting down the amount of light, right? So you take the inner baffle out, get a little more, probably at least one more stop of light, and it's blowing beautiful light across this surface. If you take a strobe and blow it in here without the baffle, it's going to probably cause more of a, blow right in here, and you're losing the whole box, right? So it's distributing the light evenly across the surface. So that's what a baffle does. People email me all the time, and I'm telling you, I was there, is what about silver versus white interior? Okay, what's the difference between the two? Well, by the time the light comes through this outside surface, no difference at all. Bigger the source, softer the light. Silver or white doesn't matter. However, if you take this off, and some people shoot just without the diffusion, the silver might give you a little more punch, a little more contrast. I don't know. I've never done that. But really the difference is not enough to warrant, confusion, okay? White, silver, it doesn't matter. The most important thing is how big it is and how far away it is from your subject. That's the most important thing. So don't be confused by all that. People ask me all the time, color temperature on the surface, okay? This is daylight balance, folks. In the old days, I think some of the materials that were used maybe yellowed a little bit after 10 years or whatever, 20 years. I don't know. I had one box 20 years. I think just having it out in the sun and just getting it dirty is going to, cause a little bit of maybe color temperature change. I don't know. So long as you have two boxes and you use them side by side, they're the same age, you're in good shape. If you have an old box and you get a brand new box, you might have a little bit of an issue. But in the end, with digital, I don't think it's as critical as the old days with film. So, but those are the kind of questions I get. All right, one last thing before I start. I'm going to show you now examples of some lighting techniques, okay? I use on my background lights, my edgy, we're going to show 3 light here in a second. I use grids, okay? So people always go, they email me, why do you use grids on your background lights? For one reason, to keep the flare happening in my lens. I shoot wide angle. Most of my portraits from of my athletes with a 24 millimeter lens on a full frame. That's wide. And it's a zoom lens. I actually have a tilt shift now, the Canon tilt shift, and it's just absolutely tack sharp. It's beautiful, but it's not autofocus. And you can't zoom in and out when you have a client standing over your shoulder. But zoom lenses tend to pick up more flare. And so here's what I've discovered. If you have a light that's this small and you point it toward your lens, boom, you get all those little reflector colors, things coming across your lens. You go to this size, those little artifacts, in your lens get a little softer. They're still there. Here they get a little softer, but they're still there. You get a big 7-foot, they're still there. But on 7-foot you can hardly see them. It overall flattens the image. Okay? But a grid minimizes flare. Now you can get around that if you put up a flag, right? So in some of my earlier stuff, you would see me behind the scenes. I got 2 big pieces of black foam core blocking the light. Well, that's not bad, but if you're outdoors, what a pain, right? And if you are even in a studio, now you're like, hey, how you doing, model? You're like, you're being blocked, the whole set's being blocked from you, okay? So grids are an amazing resource or piece of equipment that you can add to your softbox. It does cost a little bit of money, but in the end, I can tell you this. I've had grids from other manufacturers, and those grids start fraying and they start falling apart. I've had the Westcotts now for, I don't know, maybe 2 years, and I rip them on, rip them off, rip them on, constantly, and they are still as good as the day I bought them. So you pay maybe a little extra for them, but they're going to last, they're going to hold up. And so that's why I put grids. I have them for my small box setup and my large box setup. So I have 2 sets of grids. And I buy everything in pairs. So I buy 2 boxes, the same size in pairs, because I'm always using them. And here it is. This shot right here is done with 2 of these in the background with grids and a beauty dish, 22-inch beauty dish overhead. Okay? And now the beauty dish is probably about 2-3 feet from her, and you see how her head's lit brighter than the bottom? That's because there's a small source up above, and the light tapers down. And so, and I usually shoot right underneath my light source. So my lens is following the light source up and down. And that, she's looking up in here, but usually I determine where this light ends up by, you shoot someone straight on, and you have an overhead light source, and you'll get a shadow on the nose, typically, if they happen to have a nose. It'll go, you want that shadow to go right about in between the lip and the nose, okay? Then it depends, if you're a little higher, it's gonna go up, but you get deeper sockets. Everyone's eyes are different. So if you get it too high, all you're gonna do is these deep shadows in their eyes. Now with Photoshop, you can pull that out a little bit, but really I raise my light up and down, determining where the shadow's gonna end up on the lip. I guess you'd say the lip or above the lip, okay? But these are small sources, semi-close in, okay? So it's pretty edgy. And I call this, you're chiseling with light. You're really just, you're making it happen, okay?
Can I ask you before you go off with that?
Okay.
I'm sorry, you want questions later?
Well, all right, I don't want to get too sidetracked.
Okay, no, that's fine.
But I'm going to show you, here is, I actually took out one of the images that's between here, but here is 3 lights, same exact setup as the one before, but guess what? 7-footers behind her and a 5-foot overhead. See the difference in contrast between that 3-light setup and this 3-light setup? Same exact angles, for the most part, bigger modifiers. Now, I added a background here, right? Which is, my, sort of techniques. But that's the difference in just taking the source in relationship to the subject and changing it up. So if you bring this in really close, you bring this a 1.5 feet or 2 feet from someone, really soft. You back it up 20 feet, it's going to be harsh. It's going to take a lot of light to get this to go 20 feet though. So Rembrandt, Rembrandt cross light is one of the most beautiful lights on the planet. Okay? This is shot with this right here. Okay? And I am after that little teeny highlight on the opposite side of the cheek. So the source coming from one side, and that little triangle is called Rembrandt triangle. Rembrandt came up with that, and it's a cross light, window light effect. It's gorgeous light. It builds depth because you got highlights and then shadows, and I used it for 20-something years, 25 years. That was I was a one light photographer, cross light. Shot national ad campaigns with one light. That's all I did. It was 5 years ago that I went and started this whole 3-light approach and whatever. But this is the look that I had. This is the Type 55 Polaroid approach I was doing, large format. But it's gorgeous light. Okay. Here is cross light, but I have 2 of the Westcott umbrellas with diffusion, or the octoboxes. 2 of them. 2 huge sources blasting light across my subject. And the nice thing about this light is she can stand up, sit down, she can do a backflip. It doesn't matter. So if you have a ballerina, you have a, maybe you have a football player in a tutu, or whatever, someone's jumping and doing something through the air. These big sources give a lot of freedom in how you can move around in the set. This light is really popular with the fashion photographers that did like the Gap commercials and whatever, where you have people coming and going in the sets. And so you have let's say you have 30 models you want to photograph. Easy, boom, 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 boom. You maybe put a little mark on the paper or whatever, sweep, but they don't even have to hit that mark, and the lights doesn't change.
What's the color of the background?
That's a light gray background. Now, if I had my the problem with those big umbrellas, they throw light everywhere, right? So if you had a big sweep, like in a big studio where you got 40 feet sweep, you can just back everything up and it gets darker and darker in the background. You have a 9-foot sweep, it's really hard to get that background to turn gray. So that's when I pop on a gray background, a light gray background, paper background, to get that little darkness back there. So I pretty much have white, gray, black in my studio, that's it. I have a couple color things that, rolls that have been around for a while, some client had me do, but really I stick with those 3, and I'm pretty much safe with that. Big sources though, soft light. It's gorgeous. Okay, one light overhead. Here is a 22-inch beauty dish with a diffusion on it, okay? Doesn't matter, this could be shot, this could have been the same thing right here. But it is literally about 1.5 feet, 2 feet from him. You can hardly see it because I'm shooting with a 24mm lens, and I'm my lens is right here, and it's just right overhead. I'm getting the shadow on his eyes to just hit his nose, and he's up against a flat, and it causes a natural vignette around him. Very simple lighting. 101 lighting class, you could do that. That's so simple. In fact, I love a overhead light source. Now, real quick, because I didn't say this, but why would I take and put a round source overhead versus a square or a rectangular? Catch light. Really, that's the only reason. Okay? The quality, does it change the quality of light? No. I get so many emails, folks, and again, I was asking the same question 5 years ago. On a beauty dish, silver versus white, 22 inches, 28. Okay? Someone says, I found a 28 beauty dish. Great. Well, what's the difference between 22 and 28? Well, your 22 is going to be a little bigger. So if you put it at 1.5 feet, it's going to be softer than a 22 inch at 2.5, or a 1.5 feet. So a 28-inch beauty dish can back up a little bit and get the same quality of light. Or you can bring it in a little softer. So don't get caught up in, a catch light's right in your eye. The modifier actually shows up in the eye. People say, 24mm, you can't take a portrait with a 24mm. Who says? That's what I do. Okay, 24mm. I might go 35, but on occasion I'll use a 50. I don't think in my portfolio, there might be 2 shots in my whole portfolio that use a focal length longer than a 50mm. I'm a wide angle guy. Okay? I have a 7200. I never use it.
So you're covering up a lot of the source light with your body.
A little bit. You know, I mean, I'm pretty massive. I mean, you noticed, right? No, but yeah, you block a little bit of that 7-footer, you know, but it's really, because you're so close to it, I'm touching it, you know, and it's blasting around. So it's like, you know, yeah, you're cutting out maybe 10%, 20%, depending how big you are.
Where is the 7-footer relative?
It is on the back of my head.
Oh, so it's above. High.
It's like, okay, so here's my subject against the wall. It's behind on a stand. Sometimes I put on a boom, but I don't need a boom because I'm going to be putting my head against it. And it's just right there, touching my whole body. It's spread out over here. And I raise it up. Generally, I raise it up until I start to get a little bit of shadow. See, there's a little bit of shadow. Not a lot on her. Now, if I had a studio that had 18-foot ceilings, I could probably go a little higher, but I'm usually pushing it into my ceiling. And I would say my studio is maybe a little bit higher than this, but not much higher. So that big old 7-footer is like pushing up against the ceiling. But I want a little bit of shadow here, eyes, here, lips, chin. Just a little bit of shadow. It's gorgeous light. But anyways, I was shooting this wrapper, photographing this wrapper, and I thought, I'm going to try something I've never done before. So I took a standard reflector, okay, that comes with your flash, you know, a studio flash. It's what, 8 inches, 9 inches, 10 inches? I put a 10-degree grid in it, and I taped it off with black tape until all I had was a slit that was a 1/2 inch by the length of it. So 8-inch reflector, a 1/2 inch slit, okay, with a 10-inch grid. And I put that grid smack like right there. And then I put my wrapper against a, I think it was my Octobox, 5-footer or the bigger one. And so instead of having a white sweep, I just had the box sitting there. They went about 8 inches from the box. The grid was right here. You'll see it in a minute on a behind the scenes thing. And all I have is a little teeny slit. I have a 1/2 inch by 8 inch modifier with a grid in it. And that just put this little beam of light right here. But the background light put a little bit of light on here, but I'll show you the image here. And that's the shot. Okay? So it's a really small modifier. It's fairly close, but again, it's mixing up, saying, okay, what am I going to do differently? Well, how can I do this as an artist, be a little more creative, whatever it is. So that's very simple. And to get that background, you don't want or that background light, you don't want to have too much light blasting through it because it'll fog your whole, you know. So what you do is you power it up and power it down until you see the wrinkles, and then you just bring it up about a stop or so, and it takes the wrinkles right out of the paper, out of the material. Or you can put your little blinkies on, you know, your highlight indicator. But again, why would I do that? Well, because I'm what? Experimenting, right? I'm just taking, okay, here's a light source. What do I do with it? I want to really corral it in, and I start just experimenting with different light source. Here it is again. This was actually shot at one of my workshops. So I actually left 2 of these edge lights up. So instead of having a Octobox or a beauty dish, I put this little thing and just went boop right on it. Right, it was a little higher, so I had to go maybe 2 feet from her face. But again, it's different, right? It's kind of fun to experiment and try things different. All right, simulating sunlight. You want to know how you can simulate sunlight exactly in a studio? Okay, you know, I forgot to tell you this, and I usually start my lectures, and I just, you know, I say this and people get kind of upset sometimes, but I am not brilliant. I know you thought I was. And I am not a creative genius. But I can tell you what I am. A hard worker. And I have a passion for what I do. And I do it over and over again. I experiment, I try things, I just keep doing it. And I come up with ideas, okay? But one day I'm going, I really like that simulated sunlight in the studio. You know, you put someone against a white sweep. You've seen those shots, right? And you go, boom, up. You hit a model or, you know, subject, and it looks like they're standing outdoors. So I'm sitting there going, how do I figure that out? Well, the sun is a light source, right? All I have to do is make my light source the same size as the sun. Well, I wouldn't recommend this, but you can do this. You can take your light source outdoors, get some really thick glasses, and you take and you run it up on a pole, your light stand, put it up where the sun is, and back up until the light becomes the same size as the sun. And you just measure the distance and go in a studio. To me, on my system, was about 24 feet. 24 feet from the background gives you a really good simulated sun. If you don't want to go out that, you say you live in New York City, and that would be kind of dangerous on one of the main streets out here. You just go and take a picture, get a white wall, and go, okay, I'm going to have my subject 3 feet from my background. Just take your hand, take a picture of the shadow. And then and then simulate the edginess of that shadow, and you'll get the same look. It's about 24 feet back, okay, with a 8-inch reflector. Okay, so here, well, I had to take one of those pictures out, but here is one light source, 24 feet back, but she's got 2 huge pieces of white foam core surrounding her. So what's happening? I have a one light source, but I'm using all this fill. Okay? Photographers do this all the time. In fact, on my next video I'm going to do is going to take some subjects outdoors with big, huge flats. And we're going to use the sun, and we're going to use the sun as our light source, but soften it all down by using bounce. And if you go on a beach with a white sand type, it's got gorgeous light. You're sitting there taking a picture of a model, and you're going, wow. Well, it's all that sand bouncing light back up, right? You can do that outdoor by taking reflectors, okay? And but bouncing light back in to soften it down, but it really gives you a gorgeous look. But it's just one light source. And look, that light source is 24 feet away, right? Don't you think that should be really harsh? Well, it should be, but you got bounce. So mixing up your light sources with bounce really is kind of a cool thing to do. All right, so stopping action. I do a lot of that now, and to do that, just real quickly, because we want to move on. I got to look at my clock here. So we're 1 hour into it. You have to have a strobe that is able to freeze action, high flash duration, or there's some other ways to get around it. And that is, you can have these cameras now with speed lights can do high speed syncing, okay? And that's a little complicated. It's not, something that you can't understand, but basically that strobe is pulsating light out, and as your shutter curtain goes across your sensor, it's a slit, right? Because at 200th of a second, or 1/80th or 250, depending on your camera, when you're let's say 200. Say if my sync speed of my camera is 200th of a second. So when I set my camera at 200th of a second, when I take a picture, the curtain, there's a curtain blocking your sensor, and there's a curtain that follows it. And it goes chunk, opens up, chunk, follows it, right? And the curtain, that sensor is exposed 100%. You go to 300th of a second, or let's go to 500th or 400th of a second. You now go, the curtain block opens, and the other curtain follows it halfway down. You have a half a slit. At 1,000ths, it's a quarter of a slit. At 2,000ths, it's an eighth of a slit. At whatever, it keeps getting smaller and smaller. So when you have the high-speed syncing system on your strobes, it pulsates light out and covers every single one of those slits as it goes across the plane of sensor. Okay. The problem is that you can't get your flash to be on full power. It's got to go pop, pop, pop. So you got to have a lot of small flashes. And so, Dave Black, he does these athletes jumping, and he's got like 10 flashes in one softbox, It's bursting out. But to get around that, you can also stop action like this, is have a lighting system that has designed for high speed flash duration. Most studio strobes, unfortunately, are around 300th of a second to maybe 2,000ths of a second flash duration. To stop action, you need about 1/6000th to 1/8000th to really get that frozen perfectly. Okay, so just to give you a heads up, if you want to stop action, get this a strobe system that does that. And they're kind of expensive, so you have to be careful on what you're spending your money on. But if you never need someone jumping through the air, don't spend the money on that. But anyways, to give you an idea. All right, So when I have assistants, and I do a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and I've actually taken a little camera like a G9, Canon G9, and set it on 1 second trigger.
Time lapse.
Yeah, time lapse, and watch me work. It's kind of fun. And you watch me, I run over to my light and go, run back. I'm like a little ant going back and forth to my lights. And here's the thing, lighting, of course, the way I shoot, is so critical that 3 or 4 inches, an adjusting the light can change the whole look, can make or break the picture. That's how critical lighting is. Now, the bigger your source is, the less critical it is, okay? So if you have a beauty dish and 2 edge lights on a subject and they go like this, they're out, right? So keep that in mind as you're building your set and as you're working, that if you have the freedom to have someone be still and you want a real edgy look and you want it really fine-tuned, you can get it there. You know, so, ooh, ooh. And how do I know my edge lights? How do I know when my edge lights are right? Okay, we're gonna look at an image in here in a minute, and I'll show you. But I want my edge light, so I'm doing my 3 edge light. I want this box behind here, and I bring it forward until the light starts to get right about there. That edge light comes right down there on both sides. The overhead light fills the center part of the image. So when I'm doing a beauty fashion shot, I usually bring the overhead light up so it blends it. Okay? If I'm doing a sports figure, I take the overhead light down. And so it gets a little dark here, and the edge lights really get pronounced. But how do I know where that edge light's going to end up? Only by looking at the back of my monitor and moving those lights a couple inches forward, a couple inches back, or my subject forward and back too. Okay? No light meter in the flash meter in the world will tell you where to put those edge lights.
Modeling lights at all be using for that?
No. Yes, why don't I use modeling lights? Well, 2 reasons. One is, for years I shot with battery pack system like it was the Lumidyne. And they didn't make a modeling light system that you could put on, and it would just drain your battery, But, so I got used to not using modeling lights. But I discovered something. When I had modeling lights in the studio, I started letting the modeling lights influence where I was putting the lights, right? Oh, modeling light, Well, then I take a picture and it looks different, right? So, here's what I say. This is the way I work. It's not the way you should work, it's the way I work. Is I want the monitor only to influence me, not a modeling light, not a histogram, not a, whatever. I want the monitor. Now, I was given a lecture, and there was 3 photographers. And one photographer got up and he said, okay, well, I go by the histogram. The histogram is the most important tool on the planet. And the next guy got up and said, well, I use a flash meter. The flash meter is the most important tool on the planet. I got up and said, I use the back of the monitor. We're all different, right? So if you like a flash meter, go ahead, use it. Or if you like to use a histogram, but I can guarantee you that a histogram tells you where things are clipping and all that stuff, right? What if you want it to clip? What if you want it to be edgy, dark, gritty? Your histogram says, whoa, you're edgy, dark, gritty. Adjust. It doesn't tell you that that's what you want. So that's why I get nervous about using those systems. Use I think we're going to come up to it in a minute, your intuition. Okay, let's continue. That's behind the scenes. Actually, you know what? Let's just show that. Let's just show it. And then it's me working behind the scenes. And we're going to turn the music down because this is going to be on YouTube. So it's going to be without music, which doesn't make it as dramatic. But this is taking a couple shoots that my son actually did the camera work. The full shoots are on YouTube under my name, okay? And so here I am leaving my studio and crossing the freeway with all the trash on the streets. Really beautiful, isn't that? But at any rate, I shoot a tilt shift lens, a 17. I go left and right, shoot 2 frames, bring them together. I end up with about a 20 or 34 megapixel capture. And that was that same tree trunk that I used in that one girl. So this is just showing me in the field. We're going to get in the studio here in a second. Okay, so like I said, not as dramatic without the music. So here's a couple model shoots. This is Jill. So I'm taking 2 soft boxes, and I'm going to run 2 soft boxes side by side to make one big, long soft box, right? And so it's just a big modifier, right? 2 together. So you can always add modifiers together. I normally don't do this. I just thought I would do it to experiment. But here it is. You'll see the end result here in a second. There it is. Cross light, soft light, a little bit of gray in the background. Here's a beauty dish overhead with a sock on it, and then just a fill card. Did you see the assistant holding that? That was me. That was my hand. But really beautiful soft light. Now here's a 5-footer, 5-foot octo overhead. Okay. And here is here's Blake Griffin. So there's my sweep. And you know what? You think you have a lot of room on your sweep until a 6'8" guy steps in there and then jumps in the air, right? So there's a 5-footer with the 2 large soft boxes in the background. See the edge lights coming right here? You'll see him jumping here. So there he is again. Same lighting. I just shot a whole series. It was for Hyper Ice. There he is. I put him in a locker room. He did not go, obviously, in that locker room. It's all, put in later. Composited. And we can talk a little bit more about compositing if we have time. But all right, so here is another beauty fashion shoot or setup. So here's just a cloth. I'm just wrapping the girls in a cloth. Beauty dish overhead, fill card below. And there are some edge lights on that one, but really it's the beauty light that shows up. And here's the edge lights on the side. Oh no, some of these aren't in complete sequence. That's just a beauty dish with a fill card. So that's really a one light system. Very simple. But you see how close that beauty dish was? About that far from her face. Here's a continuous light system that do HDR. So I'm shooting 3 exposures and then combining the 2. And this goes back to beauty. I think it was a 5-foot overhead on that one. So this girl's really, really light skinned. And so one of the things I do is I try to make her even lighter skinned than normal. So you'll see that in a minute. But here's beauty dish overhead with two large boxes. But look at this. I go into the big, well here, it'll be the next, that's just the beauty dish with the edge lights.
You use tripod to shoot.
I'll talk about that in a minute. So here's 7-footers in the back, 7-footer in the back, and a 5-footer overhead. Really soft light. Still 3-light approach. So again, her skin's real light. And I do some techniques in Photoshop to lighten her skin a little bit.
And
But it's
the gray background with the white background that you were using was
just the white. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I have a light gray, which I'll sometimes add to it to darken a little bit more. So here's a musician. So Dorian, and he can tell he's getting into it. But look how close that beauty dish is. There's the little grid. Remember I told you? Yeah. Now these are not a perfect sequence here. The next image I think actually is just the beauty dish. You'll see it in a minute here. I'm moving things around here, but my son I don't think understood that. Well he didn't know what lighting I was using. But here's the beauty dish. There's the grid with just that really small slit. So that's the beauty dish. That's beauty dish. Only beauty dish with a little glow behind them, just a light on the floor. There's the grid system, and then of course there's just a 3-light setup. Let's go on to the next section here, and taking on a creative mindset. I love experimenting. I love making people larger than life. Okay? And let's explain something. The creative process has everything to do with your intuitive, your emotional and feelings approach. Your intuition is the greatest single asset you possess as an artist. Only you know the best way to go down a path. What happens is we all want someone else to tell us what we're doing, if we're doing right or wrong. We want to be reconfirmed. So people come to me like, hey, check my workout. Can you give me a critique? I'm like, I don't know where you want to end up. Now I can tell you from my platform, I would do it this way and this way, this way. And there are some basic rules in photography that you can say, you know what, I would look at this and I would look at that, and maybe encourage someone. But really, Only you can determine what path you need to go on. The fact is if you stick on that path, you're going to make a greater impact on the world than if you go and try to follow, like I said before, follow someone else's vision. And so use your intuition to tell you whether or not you're on the right path. Use it. That's why we all have something that looks different. You look at someone's portfolio, oh my gosh, what in the heck? That's amazing. You're brilliant. Well, no, they just went down their own path, the path of what works best for them. A technical instrument can never make creative decisions. It's reserved for the human mind. We talked about that earlier. Here's my saying. A sandbag has 1,000 more uses than a flash meter. I use a sandbag every single day. 10 of them, hanging down my lights, holding them down. I haven't used a flash meter in 25 years. I say this only to poke fun, okay? Tim Meyer from Brooks Art Institute, when I went out there to speak, he came to me and goes, I hadn't even met him. He goes, I hate you. And I go, and he started laughing. He goes, no, I love your work, but I don't like that saying that you said. And we tease each other today because he is a very technical guy, and he loves to teach showing all this technique. It's great. And of course, I've gone through a lot of that. But the fact is that ultimately, a flash meter can't make a creative decision for you. That is something that you need to do with your intuition and being an artist. A human mind makes an evaluation based on what the artist likes or dislikes. So I have a saying, you are an artist. And people sometimes don't want to take that. They want to go, really? I'm an artist? Yes. And I say this, if you have my definition of artist is, if you have a passion to create, you're an artist. And how many of you here have a passion to create? Every single one in this room has a passion to create. In fact, I believe everyone has it built into their very DNA, a desire to create. So how do I know when my lights are right? Well, it feels right. When it feels right. I'm going to give you an example of that in just a minute. Okay? Working from your intuition or from your uniqueness can be a frightening place because it opens the door to criticism. And guess what? Nobody likes to be criticized. You may be tough as nails, but guess what? You're not tough as nails. We all have a point in which we go and crumble and we come and give in. And I have this saying, I don't know if it's on my slide thing here, but everyone in this room, including me, in fact, everyone on the planet, including me, is weak, fragile, and insecure. You don't like to be told that, do you? I can guarantee you. I can prove it to you. Some people are, I'm not weak, fragile, insecure. Okay? I'll prove it to you. You put your work up on Flickr or Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and you get praise, 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 praise. Someone goes, oh, this is amazing work. Oh, you're killer, man. You rock. You get a 99 praises, and you get one stupid jerk that says, I hate it. And when you go to bed, what do you remember?
The bag.
Yeah. And guess what? You go look up that person's work and you go, their work sucks. They have no authority to talk to me like that. We're weak, fragile, and secure. We don't like to be critiqued. We don't like to be criticized. And so we all give in to that, right? Don't like that. So what we do is we try to avoid taking risk, don't we? And stepping out a little bit. But guess what? The people that are actually the rock stars in this industry are the ones that are all taking the risks. So don't be afraid to take a risk. Don't be afraid to have someone say they don't like your work. It's a 100% guarantee that you will be rejected in the real world, and probably on a daily basis. But we crumble at rejection, and I have a whole thing on that. But being swayed by others' opinions can be certain death to the artist, the artistic process. Don't be swayed by others, okay? Stick with your guns. In fact, when I first started this edgy look that I'm doing right now, 3 light edgy look, I had a photographer call me up, a good friend of mine. He said, Joel, what are you doing? You're going to create these images that are going to box you into a little corner over here. And I said, that's exactly what I want to do. He goes, yeah, but I was shooting healthcare ad campaigns and stuff, all, typically large format, black and white at the time. He said, this is not, this look doesn't fit the industry that you've been working in. I said, I don't care. I love it. Guess what? I did a big, huge ad campaign for Pfizer using this edgy look, okay? And I stuck with my guns. I said, this is what I love to do, and guess what? The audience will come to you. I mean, you got to market, but I'm saying you will find an audience for your look. Putting your neck on the chopping block is if you do, someone's going to take a swing at it. Don't be surprised. And you know what? The problem with social media is that we put our work out there and we get a lot of praise, right? But we can get people that don't have a clue what they're talking about, that poke, a jab at you. And you know what? If they had some authority, it would be great. You say, well, yeah, you know what? That's a good idea. I think I'll try that. But the fact is that most of the time the critiques are, someone trying to be mean, but also a lot of people say you're really the greatest thing on the planet, and they may not have the authority to say that either. So take it all in, with a grain of salt. But don't be afraid to have someone poke at you. No artist is loved by everyone, and so that's important to note that. All right, let's go back to this. I grew up and I studied photography, and one of the things that I wanted to do was get the perfect exposure, right? And I spent all this time going, how do I get the perfect exposure? Anybody been there? Right? Well, And so I discovered something. Again, I talked about this a little bit, that the perfect exposure really is ultimately, if it's a creative process, it's determined by the artist, right? Now, we all know what a great 18% grade card is, right? Mm-hmm. Okay? And if you don't know, your meter on your camera or any flash or meter or flash meter, whatever, is calibrated at 18% gray, which is basically, the best way to explain that, is halfway between black and white. It's a gray card, okay? And so they have to calibrate it some way, and so they calibrate your meters that way. Now we have matrix metering, all this stuff, but basically, if you take a spot meter and you meter a gray card in your scene, so this wall's not 18% gray, but if it were, I can take a picture of that wall and process everything through, and I get to the end, I get a 18% gray card in my frame, in my picture, right? Let me ask you something. How many in here is goal in life, their aspirations in life is to get a gray card to be 100%, 18% reflective? No. We want to make something look dramatic, emotional. We want things to happen in our images that move people, right? So if my goal is to get a correct exposure, the chances are I'm going to create a boring image if it's perfectly 100% technically correct. I don't want that. That's why I show you some of these pictures are blown out, they're really dark, because I'm creating an emotion in my images. So my goal isn't a perfect exposure, but at one point it was. And so I'm going to show you here, Timothy. So Timothy was the very, 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 very first subject I ever brought in the studio that I did more than one light to. Now, when I shot group shots for people, I did the Broncos team portrait, I shot more lights. But whenever I did a portrait, one light, cross light, 25 years. And you know what? I was kind of getting good at that. I think I kind of mastered that. One light. Then I decided to do something different. So my wife and I were at the Gap, and we were buying clothes for my kids, and he was a checkout guy there, and I said, I got an idea. You make a great subject. Would you be willing to come in the studio? It's like, no. Finally, he said, okay. So he came in, and I had never shot with more than 3 lights on a subject. And so what I did was, I put 2 of these. I actually had I had one of them. I ordered a second one, and I had this beauty dish in my garage that sat there for 3 years. I bought it. I didn't have a clue what to do with it. I shot one of my kids with it, and I was like, whoa, and I hung it on a hook. So I brought it in, I put the beauty dish overhead. I've never, ever in my life shot a picture overhead. I mean, a modifier overhead. Put the 2 edge lights, and I started clicking, moving it, looking at the back of my monitor, move, until I got it the way I liked it. That launched my 3-edge lighting technique that I'm doing today. In fact, it changed my life. Because I'm standing here today because of this look. That's what I've gotten known for. Okay? How did I reach it? Did I reach it by lighting ratios, schematics, flash meter, histogram? No, by my intuition. I started building the drama to what looked good for me as an artist. If I had a professor in photography stand over me, too dark, you know, lighting ratios aren't correct, or whatever, I don't know, maybe, who knows. I'm just saying that I built it based on what I like. That's the direction you need to go in, is to create imagery that you go, oh my goodness, I'm so excited. And you do it over and over again and build a body of work. I built a body of work based on this 3-edge light. And I'm shooting Blake Griffin, Reggie Bush, Devin Hester, all these guys, because I stuck with one look and I beat it into the ground. I get emails all the time. And when are you going to move on to something else? Like, when I'm ready? When I'm done with it? You know? Or the industry says we're done with it. I don't know. Maybe I want to make a living at it. But the point is I'm going to do it over and over until I get it right. That was the first picture I ever did, 3 lights. Here's 3 lights, more current, totally different look, right? Totally blown out. Would a histogram tell me I'm right on there? No. So, but I love it. I love the subtlety of it. I love it. I love those kind of things. So that's my point, is to work with your intuition, and you're going to be better off in the long run. So let's go with the building blocks to a dramatic portrait. And we'll go about another 15 minutes, and then we'll have some time for questions. Okay?
Composites too?
What's that?
Compositing?
I can talk about composites a little bit, but a composite is this, okay? I want you to think about this. Remember I said I am not brilliant, I'm not a creative genius, okay? That's just, let's establish that. I'm a hard worker, and I have a passion for what I do, and I don't give up. I have a goal, I set out to achieve that goal, and I pretty much will sacrifice anything except my family to get there. I'm a hard worker, okay? I don't watch football. You know, I actually did watch a football game last Sunday, but that's the first game I've watched. I mean, I probably watched 5 football games in the last 5 years. 1 a year, maybe. Because on a Sunday afternoon, what am I doing?
Shooting.
I'm going out shooting backgrounds. I'm creating images to further my vision as an artist, okay? A composite, see, I was shooting strobing people outdoors for years, okay? So I have my subject. I bring a softbox in, always cross light, right? And then I take my shutter speed and my f-stop, the power of light, and I would darken the background, okay? And I built these dramatic portraits with that system, okay? But it was really 2 parts. It was a subject, background, subject, background. Well, when Photoshop came along and all this, and part of it was because of the ad agencies are running out of money, right? And so I said, you know what? I can shoot someone in a studio, drop in the background, and save a lot of money. We don't have to have a whole crew, motorhome, all this, you know, stuff out into a location. And so I started doing composites based on that, but I'd already been doing it for 25 years. Not truly composites, but the concept of a subject and a background. So I immediately fell right into this, okay? So here I have a subject who's shot in a studio, and the background is just a tunnel, downtown LA. Okay, nothing fancy about that tunnel. But I'm creating a mood and a drama that I did and I've been doing for 25, I've been trying to do for 25 years. Now it's 3-edge light, right? It's more and more dramatic. But here's the deal. I work toward my composites to sell a fake. I call it sell a fake. That guy was not standing in New Orleans. In fact, he's from Denver. He's in a band and he wanted a picture. And that's actually his car in the background. I put that in there. But I'm creating a drama with this guy, but yet, in fact, I could have been there with those lights and probably created the same thing. Very difficult, but I'm selling a fake. It's kind of reality, it's a touch of fantasy, but it's selling a fake. So you only have to work and cut out, I do cutouts to sell the fake. You don't have to do it until you sell the fake. I had a little glow behind it, and that's a whole other thing. I have tutorials on that, but I love this. Taking a musician and creating images that make them look larger than life. All right, real quick, we're going to go through this. So me as an artist, I'm drawn to how light strikes a face. I love it. I love that, how the light just models the face. I believe everyone has a look that's worthy of photography. Does that make sense? You know, yes, we call attractive people or whatever, but I love bringing someone and go, oh, okay, what can I do with this person and create a portrait that stands out. And so lighting is very important to me. And so I spend a lot of time on lighting. So, but another thing I ask is who's my subject? So when someone comes in, I have an athlete or a musician or an actor, I say, who's my subject? Where do I want to go? And I think about it, you know? Again, I'm not brilliant, but at least I process it. And I say, okay, what environment should I put this person in? So I think about, oh, I got this girl, she's got really light skin, she's got blonde hair. I'm gonna use really soft light. I'm gonna put her in a background that's really light. So I'm thinking about that as she's walking in the door. So those are kind of the questions I ask. So when I approach a portrait, I ask these questions, okay? You probably know all these, but I want to build depth, evoke emotion, and reveal character. Those are three things that help me, assist me in when I'm doing a portrait. Okay, we're gonna go through this really fast. Building depth, okay? Now, there's all sorts of techniques that we've been building depth for years, right? Because a photograph is a two-dimensional representation. It's not reality, okay? It's two dimensions. And so we have to create depth somehow to sell it, okay? So how do I do that? How do I create depth? And lighting is one of them, but here's a couple things that I do to help create depth. One is creating tonal values from highlights to shadows. That builds depth. It models someone. So at cross light, the Rembrandt was really simple. Boom. You got highlights, you got shadows. Okay? So when I have an overhead light, do I want to overlight it? Well, you could. I do that. You see some of my stuff. But sometimes I want to build depth through highlights and shadows. So let's see if I got a couple images. Here's one. See the highlights on his cheeks? And the shadow done in his face here? Okay? See his arm? You got in here, it's darker, and then lighter. So it's value change. Okay? A value change is very important when it comes to subjects, building depth. Looks like he's sitting there, right? But he's not. Okay, but I'm creating depth through lighting. Okay, forced perspective is another one. I use a lot of forced perspective. Here's Will Blackman. I think he's on, I can't remember what team he's on now, Green Bay. Look at the staircase. Building depth, forced perspective. There it is, that swimmer again. So I use depth a lot, forcing your eye to give a sense that there's depth in the image. Okay, selective. Every background I have, I captured. People say, "Hey, can I buy your backgrounds?" No. Why? Would you want to put one of your images in my background? Not really, would you? Because you're an artist. I would never want to put someone else's background or my subject in someone else's background. Now, if I'm in a client situation and I do the portrait and they do their thing, maybe. But I'm an artist. So, yes, every background, I go out and I roam the countryside, the streets and the whatever, looking for backgrounds. It's a very time-consuming thing. Selective focus. We've been doing this for years, right? Shallow focus, that's shallow. I don't do a lot of this because I shoot at wide angle, but I'm trying to find examples. Here's one with a 4x5. I'm shooting at f5.6, wide open, a couple little Canon strobes in a softbox, boom, and I've got enough light on him, and I've knocked the background down, but it's out of focus. He pops off the page. That's old stuff before digital, but all right, near-far perspective. And again, I love wide angle. Why do I use wide angle a lot? Because it stretches someone out. His hands are bigger than his feet because his hands are closer to me. His body is stretched. His legs are smaller than his head. But it gives a sense of depth. So that's why I use a 24 millimeter on my subjects. The background's a 16 millimeter. But here's Dennis Haysbert. But see how his arms are bigger? Gives him a sense of power, a sense of authority. He was the president of the United States at one point.
Yep. 2010.
Yeah. So depth, look at that. You know, that's what I want. I want to, that's Jimmy Rollins. I love forced perspective and using a wide angle lens to stretch things out. Okay? Yes, it stretches noses. And you can get away with that a little bit. Sometimes I'll shoot a subject and their nose got a little too big. And then liquefy, I just push it back down a little bit, okay? All right. Dark background. So you darken the background, it pops the subject, right? So I do that a lot. I darken the background. That's actually shot on location, one shot. But darkening the background helps build depth. It pops someone out off the background. I do that a lot, and I love it. Very dramatic. Again. And that's just with a gray sweep in the background. Okay, light in the background. So you do the opposite. Okay? So you're blasting light in the tunnel. Here's Troy Polamalu. And it's like he's walking through that thing. It's forcing that depth look. And that's just using a white brush set on 30% opacity, 30% flow. And I just go on the softest setting. I have no idea what that was. But I'm just fogging that background. Okay? So it's creating a sense of depth. Okay? I love it. I love it. All right? So there's forced perspective. There's all sorts of things going on here. Wide angle lens, forced perspective, it's light streaks, you know, all those things happening to create depth in my photographs.
Taking a lot of angles of the backgrounds, like different heights.
Yeah, okay. All right. So good question. What he's asking is do I change my angle of my heights on my background? So let's say I go into this tunnel and I go, hey, this is a great background. What I do typically, I shoot my camera about maybe 2.5 feet off the ground, and I shoot it about here. Really 2 spaces, because on my athletes that are full length, I usually shoot them about that low off the ground, about 2 feet off the ground. So I want to have close to that angle. Doesn't have to be exact. Don't get caught up in, I did this at the beginning, measuring, you know, everything, calculating the lens to the, you know. You got to sell the fake, right? So that's a 16 millimeter background, 24 millimeter on him. 2 different focal lengths. Does it work?
Yep.
Well, if it sells a fake, it works, right? So I don't get too caught up into it, you know, by getting too worried. He's walking in the studio. You know, I have him walk, flip his coat, boom, fire it off. But I'm in the background. I'm teaching a workshop in Portland. I get there a day early. What am I doing? Roaming the streets.
Scouting.
Okay, that's the fun thing about doing.
Those HDRs a lot of your background?
Every single one is HDR. Every single one. I shoot now. Most of those was shooting 5 stops. So normal, 1 under, 2 under, 1 over, 2 over. But then it takes a lot longer to process. And then Matt Kowalski from Kelby Training came to one of my workshops and he said, Joel, take 3 frames, but a 2 under, a normal, a 2 over. And I went, I don't know. I'm not a believer. And I did the comparison, couldn't tell the difference. So now I do a 3-click, bracket, 2 stops each way. But it's a 5-stop range, but it's only 3 clicks. So it saves my processing time a lot. All right, use of color. Color can be, and I don't have a lot. By the way, did I tell you guys I am colorblind?
No.
I'm really bad colorblind. In fact, I can't even, to be honest with you, I think I know that's yellow, but it could be green. That's how bad I am. But luckily in Photoshop, your filters are named. And I can go and get a yellow filter or whatever. But I can't pick color off a color wheel. That goes back to this. I'm colorblind, but you say, how can you be a photographer and be colorblind, right? Well, it allows me to go down a path that someone else doesn't go down. So your greatest, you think your weakness is going to hold you back? Your weakness can be your greatest strength because it sets you apart. So you may be 4'2" or 7'2". You say, I'm too tall to be a photographer. Well, maybe not. I'm too short to be a photographer. You know, I'm a guy, I'm a girl, I'm this, whatever. You know, I thought being bald might affect my photography, but really, it doesn't matter. Go down the path that you love and your uniqueness. And
How did you create that background?
that was on a white sweep. I just added color to it. One day I thought I'd try it.
So you're brushing it in?
No, it's a color fill, I believe. I added the shadows to it,
Oh, okay, I was going to ask about the shadow.
but really, he's just on a white sweep. I just thought one day I'd try it. And I got a little nervous because I thought I was trying to pick yellow and things happened. I didn't know if I got it right. But color, that's in Death Valley, but you know. So using color. All right, so we got to run out of time here. We got about 3 minutes. Evoke emotion. Everyday life can be kind of dull, boring, and often we want to escape, right? And so what I want to do to give my viewers an opportunity to escape. So what did I say? I want to make good-looking people better looking, strong people look stronger, happy people look happier. I want to make life exciting. And so we have an opportunity as photographers to do that. And so I like creating images that if you're in hockey, you're going, oh my gosh, that's amazing. If you're a surfer, oh my gosh. There's Karan Clemens, the Olympic athlete. I want to create that larger than life. And we often want to be transported into that. That's why people have a calendar of the beach, and they go, one day I'm going to go to the beach as a vacation. And so we have all these things that I think about, the past, the good old days, the future, dreams of better days, love, lost, found, hope, all these things I'm thinking about as I create an image is what am I trying to convey? And sometimes it's a good idea just to say, I'm going to do a series of images on superheroes or on just maybe peace, relaxation, and create images. And so it's nice to think about that. Again, superheroes. I love superheroes. I love, if you're a surfer, you're like, oh my gosh, that brings back memories when I was a kid growing up surfing and swimming or whatever it is. Adding my touch to it. So these things I think about as I'm creating images. Again, I'm not brilliant, but I do stop sometimes and think about where do I want to end up? And you have the power to tap into people's emotions. It's kind of a fun thing. You have that power. So here's a lot of images here, just kind of talk about emotions and different things. Laughter. All right, well, we're going to have to stop here, unfortunately, because we got 15 minutes left, and I want to answer some questions. And so let's start. Again, I'll have to repeat the question because you won't be able to hear it, but anybody got a question?
Do you use Topaz or other plugins on some of the apps?
All right, so good question. He asked, do I use Topaz or other? There's other I call them third-party software things. Here's my take on it. I do use Nick, okay? And Nick has used me, N-I-K, okay? Here's the thing, though. Learn Photoshop, folks. It's an endless program that can allow you to do just about anything you want, anything you can dream up. If you can find a third-party plug-in that allows you to get to where you need to go, nothing better. However, don't rely on that. Get to where you can learn Photoshop. If you're dedicated to Photoshop, you can learn it in a couple years. You can be up to speed pretty quick, okay? But if there's a shortcut and it is your vision, use it. But don't let someone determine what your vision is, right? Don't try to take a shortcut because there's a grunge button that you can click and you end up with grunge, Do it, try to experiment. Look, I'm going to tell you something. I find this absolutely unbelievable. I'm colorblind. I'm from a small town, Tucson, Arizona, And again, when I was in school, I wasn't the star student. There was people around me, I'm thinking, oh, look at all this talent around me. And I put my pictures up and they get shredded. They'd say, terrible. I didn't think I could ever make it in this industry, okay? You know what's funny and interesting? I'm an instructor at Kelby Training. How's that possible? Teaching Photoshop and all these techniques, how's that possible? What did I do? I worked hard. I stuck with something. I created my own look, right? And I did it over and over and over again. And I became an expert in what I like to do. I'm not an expert in Photoshop. I'm an expert in what I like. And so I got this attention, okay? So I went down a path that fit me. I started going, ooh, I like this desaturation. I like all this stuff, okay? And so your path is going to be different than me. And you could be an expert in what you love. You don't have to be an expert in Photoshop. You have an expert in what you love. And now I'm one of the, in Adobe, you go to Photoshop, and I'm one of the featured artists now. They just put it up a couple weeks ago. That just blows me away. How's that possible? Well, again, it's by sticking to my guns and not letting other people influence me. And I just said, this is what I love to do, and I'm going to go for it. And I went for it. And I'm a testimony to that. Again, it's not because I'm brilliant or because I'm a creative genius. It's because I have a hard-working ethic. Any other questions?
Does your lighting affect your background composition, or does your composition affect your lighting? Like, do you think of the background first, then the lighting? Or?
All right, so the question is, do I think about my lighting, okay, do I think about my lighting on my background, and I think about my lighting on my foreground? And which comes first, okay? I can go both ways. I can create the subject first and then put them in the background, but I can tell you this. Three-edge light, this is a three-edge light approach right here, can be dropped into just about any background. You do a cross light though, so you have a cross light Rembrandt look right here, but you have your background light going that way, it's not going to work. Your background light on a cross light has to go in the same direction, otherwise it doesn't look real. But a three-edged light can pretty much go into any background. I didn't know that at first. I could say I take credit for that. I'm so smart that I figured it all out. But I just started doing a three-edged light, and I'm like, okay, well, that works. Oh, that works. It works in every background. I don't know why. It just does, because you've got light sources that bounce around and all that stuff. So I do think about I got to sell the fake, right? But it's not as critical as you might think, okay? So, like I said, sometimes I end up with the background first, and I go, okay, I got to find a subject, put them in there. But it's not, I can't think that far ahead. So, you know.
Are you doing all your own work with the pen tool in Photoshop for compositing? I mean, are you the one finding your edges?
Actually, I have these little elves. So he asked the question, do I do all my own Photoshopping and all my retouching? Yes, I do. You know why I do that? Because I'm an artist. And I want to have, I'm not a control freak, but I want to be able to see it all the way through. I've had clients come to me, we're talking big ad campaigns. They say, we want you to shoot the subject, we're going to have all our retouchers do everything and do the background. You got the wrong person. And I go, I go, give it to me, I'll do the whole thing. And I've swayed, the last couple years, I've swayed some huge ad campaigns to give me the whole thing. And I love it. Now, I can tell you this. In a given day, I can make this much money as a photographer and this much money as a retoucher. So why would I drive myself crazy being a retoucher? I mean, it doesn't make sense economically or from a business standpoint.
It's your point of view.
Yeah, but I mean, I can't bill this for retouching, but I can bill that for photography. So sometimes it kind of drives me nuts because I'll get a job, it's a 2-day shoot, and I spend 8 days retouching. And I know I'm not making very much money on the retouching. Does that make sense? But I know I see it all the way through. And you know, in the end, I put it up and I go, that's my image. That's why I'm doing this, right? Because I want to see it through. So that's a good question.
How is it, this sort of has some of it, some of your pictures where everything looks like it's actually brushwork, like it's a painting more than a photograph.
All right, so she's asking how I'm getting this treatment, okay? I'm going to give it to you really simple, and we don't have much time. I can't get into it too much, but here's what I do, okay? I take the original capture, raw capture. I bring it into Bridge. And in Bridge, I have some options, okay? I take a slider, these sliders, and now in CS6, it's because they switched it on me. It used to be fill light. Now it's a highlight, back, I think it's called shadows. Yeah, shadow, I shift the shadow over to the right. So I'm taking out the shadows, okay? I take the contrast out, and I open it up as a smart object, okay? And the reason why I do that is because I'm still tied to, when I go into Photoshop, I'm still tied to mother, the mama. There's an umbilical cord between mama and my image in Photoshop. And at some point I'm gonna have to cut that, but right now, when I first open it up, I still have the option to go back to raw, converter. And so then I take and I create a second layer, not just duplicate it, but I do it via smart object. And I allow myself to go back to raw with 2 layers, and I take and I create one into a black and white. So I have a color version, a black and white version. I put the 2 together and I blend it in overlay or soft light. Okay? Now I have a desaturated look, okay? But I'm not tied. I can still go back and fine tune it in raw with basically non-destructive. And then I go on, I move on to that. I move on, I do a little bit of overlay and some stuff and soften it up. And so that's how I get that look. Now, how did I discover that look?
Experiment.
2 weeks I locked myself in a room. I am not kidding you. And I went down this path, nope, with this path, nope. This was 5 years ago when there wasn't a lot of this tutorials and stuff out there. And I created this look, and then pretty soon everything was on the internet buzz. How does Joel do that? Well, it wasn't brilliant, but again, it was because I didn't give up and I said, this is what I want to end up with. This is actually one of the earlier images that I used. But it's not, again, it's not, you could probably do that same look 100 different ways. I just came up with a way that's pretty simple, and I can go through it pretty fast, okay? But that's how I get that painterly look, okay? Any other questions?
I had a question about your interaction with your subject. So when you're moving a light 4 inches across, and I see you show them the camera a lot.
Yeah.
How do you discuss it with them? Do you explain what you're doing?
All right. So the question is, when I'm photographing someone and I have this interaction going, number one, I'm showing them often the back of the monitor. Okay. And some photographers would never do that, right? My personality is, hey, I'm excited. I want my subject to be excited, right? And sometimes they go, you know what if I turn this way a little bit? I go, yeah. And I have their input also. I love their input. It's kind of a joint thing. I don't want to say, here's what I want, by golly. But a lot of times what happens is, between the two of us, we come to sort of this, this thing. Something's happening, right? So I don't mind showing it. I also don't want to over-direct somebody, okay? A lot of times, well, here's what happens. Someone's doing something, I'm going, okay, could you do this? And we're taking pictures. And all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, hold on, my card's full, let me change the card. And they go over there and they go like this. They're looking around, and I go, stop. Oh my gosh. And it's like, that's the shot. And so I want to look for that. I think a good photographer is one who can recognize the shot, not necessarily direct it, okay? So that's a good question.
Do you shoot your backgrounds at f22 to try to get everything in focus?
No. I avoid f22. Why? Because you have diffraction. Okay? So almost every single background I've ever photographed is f8 or f9. And my subjects are 7.1 to f8, f9, somewhere around there. Because that's the sweet spot of the lens. So he was asking the question, why don't I use f22? Because I avoid diffraction or aberration. Now, if you have to shoot wide open, shoot wide open. If you really, I have a tilt shift lens, and on occasion I'll tilt it. I'll tilt it down to get that depth of field. But you know what? Here's the beauty of our digital cameras today. If you have a full frame sensor camera and you are at say 9, okay, you get a pretty good depth of field, right? If you are on a crop sensor, f9, you have more depth of field. If you go to like a medium format, f9 gives you very little depth of field. On a 4x5, hardly nothing. Okay, so the good news is that in the old days I shot a lot of medium format, and f9 wouldn't cut it. I had to be at f11 to get what I wanted, in focus. So we're at a great age of photography. We have these small cameras that can get us a lot of depth of field, still have great optics. They're not perfect, I know that, and the corners are usually where you see the bad, things happening in your image. And I always shoot on a tripod. Why? Because I can guarantee you this. You can take the most expensive lens that money can buy and hand hold it, and you can put a kit lens on a tripod, and I guarantee you the kit lens at f8, and your kit lens is going to be sharper. A stable, vibration is the single greatest cause of loss of sharpness or detail in your image. So a solid platform is the best thing you could ever invest in. And yes, it's a pain in the butt sometimes, because you want to be free. And you watch some movie where some fashion guy was like shooting from the hip, and that's what you want to be. But I shoot from a tripod because it's a stable platform. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've proven it over and over. And my assistants are always like, why do you always have to have a tripod? Okay, watch this. I'll say, I'm going to shoot 2/50th of a second. Okay, out in the field, 2/50th like this. I'm like this. Then I get my tripod, shoot this another frame. We bring it in the studio, blow it up on monitor. Guaranteed the tripod's noticeably sharper at 2/50th of a second. So that's my little spiel right there. Anyone else?
When you do HDR photographing people, what mode do you use? Does aperture priority on manual?
Well, you're always, in HDR, you're always adjusting your shutter speed, not your f-stop. So the question was, yeah, what am I, aperture priority or shutter priority? So it would be aperture priority. I do a manual. I don't use aperture or whatever.
But they have to be really still, right?
Okay, so on an HDR portrait, yes, they can't be doing this, but guess what? All these new programs now from Photomatic's, Nikta, they have a thing where you can select an area and take out the ghosting. It's like unbelievable. Did I not say we're in the greatest age of photography? I mean, we are in an amazing time frame in history. And more people are using photography as a creative outlet than ever before. We have people that are just getting so excited. People that are firemen, people that are doctors, people that you know, never ever thought they'd be an artist are now going out and creating images and having a blast at it. And so that's why I love what we're doing today. So we have time for one more question. Anybody else? All right.
You shoot so many backgrounds. What mechanism or process do you use to keep yourself organized so that you can retrieve the right one?
So the question is, since I shoot so many backgrounds and I have a lot of images, and how do I organize that? Guess what? One of my strengths is not organization. I have not learned Lightroom, which I have it, and I always swear I'm going to learn it, and I haven't had time to learn it. And so what happens now is I go, wait, don't I have a bridge picture somewhere? And I'm sitting there thinking about it, and I'm pouring through 2 hours of all my files trying to find it. You know what? If someone wants to organize my images for me, I'd love to have that. But it is a task that's, you know, getting to be a little bit. And you know what? We're getting bigger and bigger files, right? So we need more and more memory, and you know, hard drives are getting stacked up, and so that is a problem. I am not the person to talk to about that. At any rate, all right, so listen, I can go on all day. I love this. I love sharing, and I don't have a secret. When I started out in photography, all the professional photographers, you'd ask them a question, hey, how do you do that? Mum's the word. Why? Because they were threatened that you'd come along and steal their work, right? Guess what? I discovered something. Nobody can steal what I do. Nobody can steal my creative vision. Is that cocky?
No, that's because
It's because that's the way life is. I can't steal your vision. And there's only so many jobs on the planet anyways. And so if you're really good at what you do, and I have a whole thing on marketing, get out there and show it, do it well, and the audience will come to me. And I tell you, the audience will come. You will start finding clients. They'll look you up. And so that's why I have no secrets, because guess what? You're one of a kind, I'm one of a kind. So I love sharing, so thank you guys for coming today.
For more information, please visit us online, give us a call, or stop by our New York City Superstore. You can also connect with us on the web.